Win this game and I'll give you $100 million. The Arab billionaire CEO laughed, slamming a polished mahogany chessboard down in the middle of the five-star hotel lobby. His voice cut through the marble halls, sharp and mocking. But don't embarrass yourself. You're just the waitress's daughter. The room froze. Investors in tailored suits, tourists clutching cocktails, and hotel staff polishing silver trays all turned their heads. This wasn't a private remark. It was a performance, staged for maximum humiliation. The billionaire leaned back in his leather chair, gold cufflinks flashing under the chandelier's glow. He was a man who wore arrogance like cologne, heavy, choking, impossible to ignore. Power wasn't just his possession. It was his favorite weapon. He lived for these moments, flaunting wealth in public, reducing others to props in his theater of superiority. Across from him stood the waitress's daughter, a black girl, no more than 18, neatly dressed in a modest blouse and skirt. Her mother, still carrying a tray from the hotel cafe, looked on with quiet panic. The girl's posture, however, betrayed no fear. Her eyes, steady, calculating, carried a brilliance no one noticed, or rather, no one thought worthy of noticing. The billionaire waved her forward, grinning as if summoning entertainment. "Come, let's show these fine people how the child of servants handles a real game," he sneered. His words dipped in cruelty. "Or do you even know how to move a pawn?" The crowd chuckled. A few investors exchanged amused glances. Phones lifted discreetly, lenses glowing, eager to capture the humiliation that seemed inevitable. A couple of hotel staff shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent. No one dared challenge the man who controlled fortunes with a signature. The girl approached the table slowly. She touched the back of a wooden pawn, her fingers delicate but confident. The billionaire smirked, mistaking her silence for timidity. "Careful," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Don't break it. These pieces are worth more than your education." Laughter erupted, echoing off the marble walls. The girl didn't respond. She pulled out the chair and sat down across from him, her face calm, her movements deliberate. Not a word passed her lips, but her presence shifted something in the air. Some of the onlookers felt it, a quiet gravity that unsettled the billionaire's show. He leaned forward, his smirk tightening into a sneer. "Very well, let's play." The room buzzed with anticipation, spectators whispering wagers under their breath. To them, it was already decided, a powerful CEO crushing a girl from the margins. But the girl's silence held a promise no one else could hear. The narrator's voice cut through the laughter like steel. They thought it was harmless mockery, but within moments their laughter would turn into stunned silence. She had grown up in the quiet shadows of that very hotel, her childhood marked by the rhythm of her mother's footsteps as she hurried between double shifts, trays balanced with weary precision. The girl spent evenings waiting in the staff lounge, her homework spread across coffee-stained tables, the faint hum of dishwashers filling the silence. Their apartment was small, their bills endless, but her mother never complained. And when the night grew late, the girl would retreat to her corner where a battered chessboard, found in a thrift store with half its pieces missing, became her sanctuary. She replaced lost nights with bottle caps and pawns with pebbles. Where others sought sleep, she sought solutions, replaying matches in her head, inventing strategies that sharpened her mind like a blade. Her grandmother's words were the anchor that steadied her. Dignity doesn't shout. It waits, and then it roars. She repeated it to herself when classmates mocked her clothes, when teachers doubted her potential, when bills arrived before paychecks. Each time she sat before that mismatched chessboard, she carried those words like a mantra. The pieces were more than wood or plastic. They were lessons in patience, resilience, and foresight, a map for surviving a world stacked against her. She dreamed, not of riches, but of chances, of scholarships that might carry her to tournaments, of competitions where her name could mean more than just the waitress's daughter. Money was scarce, resources scarcer, but knowledge was free if she knew where to look. She borrowed time on the hotel's computer, watching grainy videos of grandmasters trading moves like secrets. She scribbled down their strategies in a tattered notebook, memorizing openings and endgames until they became second nature. Each victory in her mind's practice was a small rebellion against the limits set on her life. Meanwhile, the billionaire lived in a different universe altogether. Born into palaces of glass and marble, His toys were investments, and his playgrounds were boardrooms. Power came to him not through effort but inheritance, and he wore it as though it were woven into his blood. To him, wealth was not just privilege, it was proof of superiority. Status was his shield, arrogance his language. Chess, for him, wasn't a discipline of patience or intellect, it was a stage prop, a way to parade his supposed cleverness before investors, to remind others that even in games, he was untouchable. He never imagined that the game he used as a weapon of humiliation could become the stage for his undoing. In his world, brilliance belonged only to those who could afford it. In hers, brilliance was born out of necessity, carved from sleepless nights and quiet hunger. He had always believed strategy and intellect were the privileges of the elite. He never stopped to consider that sometimes the sharpest minds are shaped not by comfort, but by struggle. And so, while he laughed at her background, mocking her as the daughter of a waitress, he failed to see what lived behind her silence. Each pause, each measured glance at the chessboard was not hesitation. It was calculation. It was foresight honed sharper than the edge of his wealth. His arrogance made him blind to it. Her dignity made her patient enough to wait. What he didn't realize was that her silence carried more weight than all the noise of his cruelty combined. And when it finally roared, it would echo louder than his billions ever could. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, a smirk dancing on his lips as he tapped a jeweled finger against the side of the chessboard. "Imagine this," he announced to the glittering audience in the five-star hotel lobby, his voice dripping with arrogance. "If she wins, I'll wash dishes here for a year. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, that's impossible." His words drew laughter from the crowd, a ripple of mockery that echoed through the high-ceilinged hall like applause at a cruel theater. Cameras lifted, phones angled, and a handful of guests clapped in delight at his joke. She didn't flinch. Her hands moved steadily, arranging pawns on the board with a kind of reverence, as though each piece held a secret no one else could see. The billionaire's jabs slid past her like wind against stone. Her silence wasn't submission. It was calculation. It was the sound of patience sharpening itself. She placed her last piece, folded her hands neatly in her lap, and waited. The billionaire frowned briefly at her lack of reaction before puffing up his chest again. "Look at her," he scoffed, gesturing toward her with a theatrical wave. "The daughter of a waitress, daring to play against me. Someone bring her an apron. Maybe she'll do better in the kitchen than at this table." Laughter exploded again, the kind that was more about belonging than genuine amusement. People laughed because others did, because they didn't want to be the ones left in silence. But in the far corners of the room, a different energy stirred. A businessman near the back leaned toward his colleague and muttered under his breath, "Careful. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you." His words barely reached above the chuckles, but those close enough to hear glanced back at the girl, noticing what he had. That stillness, that unbothered composure. It wasn't defiance. It was something deeper, something steadier. The billionaire, sensing unease, doubled down. He mocked her every move, sneering when she touched a pawn, scoffing when she adjusted a rook. "See?" he said loudly. "She doesn't even know which way they move. This will be over before my coffee cools." More laughter followed, but it rang thinner this time, with a few hesitant eyes darting between the girl and the board. She didn't rise to defend herself. Instead, she lifted her gaze for just a moment and met the billionaire's eyes. There was no anger there, no fear, only a calm certainty that unsettled him in ways he couldn't admit. He quickly broke eye contact, turning to the crowd as though to reassure himself of their allegiance. "Watch closely," he said. "I'll end this in 5 moves." The game began. He played aggressively, slamming pieces down, eager to prove dominance. She responded with quiet, deliberate motions, her moves so swift and precise that a few spectators frowned, suddenly recognizing a rhythm they had seen only in real matches, not in casual play. "She's too calm," one whispered, phone trembling slightly as it recorded. "Something's off." The crowd split before their own eyes could accept it. Some still laughed, clinging to the comfort of the billionaire's certainty. Others leaned forward, captivated by the way her fingers moved across the board. Smooth, confident, exact. Each move she made didn't just answer his attacks. It anticipated them, redirecting his arrogance into traps he couldn't yet see. The billionaire's bravado began to falter, though his mouth never stopped moving. "Beginner's luck," he said, voice louder than necessary, trying to mask the unease creeping in. "Anyone can stumble into the right move once or twice." But the hesitation in his hands betrayed him. His fingers lingered too long over his queen, his brow furrowed too deeply when he noticed his knight cornered. Every whisper of unease in the audience grew louder, spreading like wildfire. "She's not guessing," murmured one guest. "She knows exactly what she's doing." Another whispered, "This isn't luck, it's skill." The phones that once recorded for mockery now recorded for awe, the tone of the crowd shifting with each exchange of pieces, and through it all, she remained silent, her expression unchanging, her movements as composed as the grandmotherly wisdom that had guided her all her life. Dignity didn't shout. It waited. It calculated. It roared only when the time was right. The tension coiled tighter with every move. The billionaire grew more frantic, trying to laugh off his mistakes while she grew steadier, as though she had expected every stumble, every flaw. The stage he had built for humiliation was turning, piece by piece, into her battlefield. And though the final blow had not yet been delivered, those who truly paid attention could already feel it. The balance shifting, arrogance unraveling, dignity rising. The quiet storm she carried was about to break, and when it did, the silence in the room would drown out every laugh that had come before. The billionaire leaned back in his leather chair, lips curling into the same sneer that had carried him through boardrooms and hotel lobbies alike. His voice, rich with arrogance, cut across the hushed murmur of the crowd. "Make your move, girl," he said, each word slow, deliberate, sharpened to humiliate. "Show everyone how far a maid's daughter can go." He chuckled at his own cruelty, looking around at his guests, as if inviting them to share in his superiority. The girl's hands hovered over the board for only a second before her fingers touched a knight. With calm precision, she slid it forward. It wasn't random. It wasn't timid. It was the opening act of a storm long prepared. The billionaire scoffed. "Cute, but chess is not checkers." He slammed his queen across the board in response, a theatrical move for the cameras watching through phones. The crowd chuckled obediently. But then something shifted. Her rook darted out like a blade, cornering his knight. A few spectators leaned closer. Within minutes, the board was transformed. She sacrificed her bishop in a move so daring the room gasped. But it wasn't carelessness. Every sacrifice was a stepping stone, a calculated trade that dismantled his defense piece by piece. What looked like recklessness revealed itself as brilliance, a strategy only a true student of the game could see. Gasps rippled through the audience as his defenses crumbled faster than anyone could have imagined. The billionaire's smirk faltered. He leaned forward now, hands sweating against the edge of the board. His laughter came forced, jagged. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, though his eyes betrayed panic. The room, once filled with mocking whispers, now held its breath. Phones zoomed in, recording every flick of her wrist, every collapse of his position. Then came the tests. "Play this variation," one investor called out, emboldened by the shifting tide. "What about this trap?" Another shouted, as though eager to prove her victory was chance. Without missing a beat, she indulged them. Her moves unfolded like poetry. Rook sliding into place, queen weaving through spaces like silk, pawns marching with quiet inevitability. Each question thrown her way became another chance to shine. Each trap suggested was dismantled with grace, and the crowd, the same crowd that had laughed at her, now burst into cheers after every countermove. Every captured piece felt like a small revolution, every check like a roar of justice. The billionaire was unraveling. He wiped his brow with a silk handkerchief, fumbled with his cufflinks, tried to disguise trembling fingers. His once commanding voice shrank into mutters. This is ridiculous. She can't." But his eyes never left the board, trapped by the inevitability of what was coming. Meanwhile, she remained calm, her breathing steady, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't just playing chess. She was dismantling an empire of arrogance, piece by piece, move by move. The shift of power was undeniable. The once laughing audience now applauded her openly. Phones no longer recorded for mockery, but for history. She, the waitress's daughter, was no longer invisible. She was commanding the room with nothing but a chessboard and quiet brilliance. Finally, as the endgame neared, she paused. The room fell into silence so heavy it rang in their ears. She looked across the board at the pale, trembling billionaire, and her voice, soft but carrying, broke the stillness. "Respect," she said, "is the only checkmate that matters." The line struck harder than any move on the board. Phones captured it instantly, destined to echo online for years. And then, the final blow. Her queen swept across the board, cornering his king with a ruthlessness wrapped in grace. Checkmate. The room froze. The billionaire stared at the board as though it had betrayed him. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came. His empire of arrogance had collapsed in a single move. The silence lasted only a breath before the lobby erupted. Applause thundered against the marble floors. Cheers drowned out his protests, and cameras flashed like lightning. Guests rushed forward to shake her hand, their faces alight with awe. And the billionaire? He sat pale, slumped in his chair, destroyed not by wealth or status, but by the very game he had chosen to humiliate her with. He had wanted a spectacle. He got one, but not the one he expected. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for more. "Play me next." Someone called, half joking, half desperate to touch the brilliance that had just unfolded. She smiled politely but shook her head. This wasn't about proving herself over and over. One checkmate was enough. The billionaire tried to rise, but his legs betrayed him. He clutched the edge of the table, knocking over a glass of wine that spilled across the marble like blood. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. The same investors who once laughed with him now whispered behind their hands. She destroyed him in less than 20 moves. And he mocked her. A maid's daughter. The whispers grew, spreading like fire. His reputation, once untouchable, was unraveling in real time. She stood, smoothing her thrifted skirt with a dignity that needed no adornment. Cameras followed her every movement. She didn't gloat, didn't bow, didn't revel in his destruction. She simply turned to her mother, who had watched silently from the side, tears brimming in her eyes. A nod passed between them, a quiet recognition of battles fought in kitchens, in cleaning closets, in endless shifts, leading to this moment of triumph. Reporters surged forward, but she raised a hand. "This isn't about me," she said softly. "It's about respect. For every person you underestimate, every voice you ignore. Remember that the board doesn't care where you're from, only how you play." Her words echoed louder than any headline could. The billionaire remained slumped, ignored by the very people who once clung to his every word. His fortune hadn't saved him, his status hadn't protected him. His downfall was sealed not by scandal or business failure, but by arrogance undone at a chessboard. The applause followed her out of the lobby, into the night, and into history. She had not only won a game, she had rewritten the story of who is worthy to sit at the table, and who will rise, even when mocked, underestimated, or dismissed. And somewhere deep inside the crowd, someone whispered the truth the billionaire had refused to see until it was too late. Sometimes the quiet ones don't just surprise you, they redefine the game. The aftermath of the checkmate was immediate and brutal. The billionaire, once the towering figure in that glittering hotel lobby, now looked like a collapsed monument. Pale, sweating, and desperately clinging to shreds of dignity that had long since scattered. The room that once celebrated his arrogance turned into a sea of whispers and pointed fingers. Board members who had moments ago clapped at his jokes were now shaking their heads, whispering to one another as though his very presence was poison to their reputations. Unbelievable. Beaten by a child. And mocked her first. Now look at him. No wonder he relies on money. Without it, he's nothing. The billionaire glanced around, searching for loyalty in the crowd, but all he found was avoidance. Investors pulled out their phones, pretending to check emails. Some turned their backs entirely. Admiration had curdled into pity, then into open mockery. For the first time in years, he was not feared or respected. He was a joke. In contrast, all eyes now turned to her. The young woman, daughter of a hotel waitress, stood in quiet composure. She hadn't gloated, hadn't humiliated him with words. The game had done that for her. And that dignity, That refusal to boast only magnified her brilliance. From the back of the crowd, a tall man in a tailored suit stepped forward. He was no ordinary guest. Whispers confirmed he was one of the world's most respected entrepreneurs, a patron of international chess foundations and a philanthropist whose opinion carried weight across continents. He clapped loudly, deliberately, letting the sound echo against the marble lobby. That, he said with a smile, was not just a game of chess. That was mastery, strategy, and courage. Young lady, you don't belong in the shadows of this hotel. You belong on the world stage. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. With reverence, he placed it on the table where her queen still rested in victory. I sponsor global tournaments, scholarships, and training with grandmasters. If you'll allow me, I'd be honored to help you take your brilliance to the highest arenas. For a moment, the young woman hesitated, blinking back tears. She wasn't used to offers like this, wasn't used to being seen. But the sincerity in his eyes told her this wasn't charity. It was recognition. She nodded softly, her hand trembling as she accepted the card. Applause erupted again, louder this time, carrying a sense of history being made. That night, in the quiet of their small apartment, she sat across from her mother at the worn kitchen table. Her hands still shook as she recounted every moment, every move, every gasp of the crowd. Finally, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she whispered into the phone she held to her ear, "Mama, we did it. I won." Her mother's voice cracked, heavy with pride and relief. "No, baby," she said, her words trembling as though carrying generations of struggle and triumph. "You didn't just win a game. You made the world listen." The girl pressed the phone to her heart, unable to speak through her sobs. For years, her mother had endured double shifts, polished silverware, carried trays with aching arms, all while whispering to her daughter that dignity mattered more than wealth. Tonight, those words had been proven true. Meanwhile, the billionaire could not escape the storm. By morning, the clips of the match had spread across every platform. Headlines screamed with merciless delight. Billionaire CEO humiliated in public, checkmated by Waitress's daughter. $100 million bet ends in crushing defeat. Arrogance meets checkmate. The video of her final line, "Respect is the only checkmate that matters," went viral, replayed millions of times, quoted in articles, reposted as memes, even printed on protest signs by groups demanding accountability from the wealthy elite. The billionaire's face, once a symbol of dominance, was now plastered across the internet as a symbol of arrogance undone. Board members distanced themselves immediately, releasing statements that they valued humility and respect. Investors canceled meetings. Stockholders demanded answers. His empire began to tremble, not from financial missteps but from reputation. And in the world of power, reputation was everything. Meanwhile, the young woman's phone flooded with messages. Offers from chess academies, universities, and global sponsors poured in. Interviews were requested, profiles drafted, her story already being translated into multiple languages. For once, her name was spoken not as the waitress's daughter, but as a prodigy, a strategist, a voice of dignity rising against arrogance, and through it all, she never once gloated. Every interview, every appearance, she spoke of her mother, her grandmother's lessons, and the truth that brilliance knows no rank or bloodline. By the end of that week, the story was no longer just about a billionaire losing a game. It was about a young woman rewriting the rules, not of chess, but of respect. The weeks following the match turned into a whirlwind, but the young woman never lost her balance. Invitations poured in from top universities around the world. Professors who had spent decades teaching strategy marveled at her natural instincts, her ability to think 10 steps ahead without hesitation. She chose carefully, not chasing prestige but selecting a program that valued both intellect and community. Within months, she was seated in lecture halls alongside some of the brightest students. Her story already inspiring countless others who once believed doors would always remain shut to them. Her brilliance carried her further than any scholarship alone could. She competed in regional and international championships, not merely winning, but dominating with a grace that left seasoned players speechless. Commentators spoke of her moves as if they were poetry, daring, precise, calculated yet fearless. And yet, what set her apart was not just her skill, but her humility. After every victory, she credited her mother, her grandmother's words, and the sacrifices that shaped her path. But she did more than win trophies. Remembering her own struggles, she launched a foundation dedicated to teaching chess and critical thinking to underprivileged youth. "Chess is more than a game," she told the cameras at her foundation's opening. "It's a language of resilience, of patience, of seeing beyond what's in front of you, and every child deserves to speak that language." Her program spread quickly, first across her city, then nationally, then across borders, offering children free lessons, mentorship, and the confidence to know their minds mattered. While her star rose, the billionaire's decline was relentless. No amount of wealth could shield him from the ridicule that clung to his name. He had once been invited to elite gatherings as a symbol of success. Now, he was whispered about in corners, mocked in headlines, and remembered only as the man who placed $100 million on arrogance and lost to a waitress's daughter. Investors pulled away. His board ousted him from several positions. Interviews he once commanded were canceled. Magazines rescinded covers, and in the rare moments his name surfaced in the media, it was attached to humiliation. For years, he had prided himself on being untouchable. Now, every time he walked into a public space, he risked hearing strangers mutter the words that had gone viral. "Respect is the only checkmate that matters." His empire stood, but his image was in ruins. Arrogance had not just destroyed his reputation, it had made him a cautionary tale. The hotel where the match had taken place also felt the shockwaves. For many of the staff, the moment was a turning point. No longer could management ignore the brilliance and sacrifice of those who worked quietly in the background. Within months, the hotel launched a series of new programs: scholarships for staff families, mentorship opportunities in business and hospitality, and even talent showcases where employees and their children could share skills, from music to strategy to storytelling. The same marble lobby that once hosted humiliation now hosted hope, and the world never forgot the story. The match, captured in grainy phone recordings, continued to circulate online, amassing millions of views. Memes spread, tweets soared, and hashtags dominated timelines. Our checkmate arrogance, our respect, is the real win, our waitress daughter victory. Teachers used the clip in classrooms as an example of dignity under pressure. Activists quoted her symbolic line at rallies. Parents told their children about the young woman who showed that brilliance does not ask permission to shine. In interviews years later, she reflected not on the game itself, but on what it represented. "It was never about beating him," she said softly. "It was about proving that no one has the right to decide who is worthy of respect. Respect is not given to the wealthy. It's earned by character." And so her story became more than a viral moment. It became a legacy, a reminder that humility outlives arrogance, that kindness is never weakness, and that brilliance can rise from anywhere. Even the daughter of a waitress standing in a five-star lobby with nothing but courage and calculation. They mocked her roots, forgetting brilliance isn't bound by bloodline or wealth. In one game of chess, arrogance collapsed, and dignity checkmated the room. The billionaire's laugh had been loud, certain, dripping with disdain. He believed the daughter of a waitress could only serve, never outthink. But the board told another story. With each move, the girl rewrote the script he had written for her. By the time her final checkmate landed, the marble lobby had transformed. What began as laughter ended in silence, and what began as silence ended in thunderous applause. The lesson is timeless, universal, undeniable. True power is knowledge, not the title on your business card or the money in your account. True wealth is humility, the ability to recognize greatness even when it comes dressed in thrifted clothes. True downfall is arrogance unmasked, the moment when pride blinds you so completely that you become the architect of your own humiliation. The story spread because it wasn't just about a girl or a billionaire. It was about all of us, about every room where someone is mocked, dismissed, or silenced, only to rise and prove that brilliance asks for no permission. If you believe brilliance can rise from anywhere, no matter where someone comes from, Share this story. Let the world see. Arrogance will always lose to dignity. Let this checkmate remind us all. Respect is the only universal victory.